This 4-year-old homeless girl sees a millionaire and his son being swept away by a river, but she saw everything and does something that shocked everyone. Watch until the end. Comment what you thought of this story, giving it a score from 0 to 10. I really want to know if you liked my story, and please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The afternoon sun beat down on the muddy banks of the Blackwater River as 4-year-old Lily Miller dragged a sack of crushed cans across the rugged terrain of the old Blackwood farm. Her bare, calloused feet knew every stone, every pothole on the path she walked daily in search of materials that might earn her a few coins. The tattered rag doll she always carried tied to her waist swayed with each step, her only companion in that solitary routine. Arthur Gable, 55, had left early that Tuesday morning to sell the collected materials in downtown Clearwater, leaving clear instructions for the girl. "You don't come back till that bag is full, or there's no dinner tonight." The harsh words echoed in Lily's mind as she picked up every piece of metal she could find, knowing that the promise of food depended on the weight she could gather. The afternoon was especially hot when a strange sound caught her attention. It was different from the constant hum of the old steel mill in the distance or the traffic on the nearby highway. It was something coming from the direction of the river. Lily stopped collecting cans and raised her head, her dark eyes scanning the bank until she found the source of the noise. A small vessel was drifting in the current, rocking erratically against the logs and rocks that dotted that stretch of the Blackwater. Even from a distance, she could make out two still figures on the improvised surface that seemed to have been part of a larger boat. One was clearly an adult man, wearing clothes that, even soaked, looked expensive, and the other was much smaller, the size of a baby. The instinct that life on the streets had developed in Lily made her drop the sack of cans and run towards the bank. At 4 years old, she had already witnessed many dangerous situations, and something in her childlike mind recognized that those people needed help. The current was carrying the makeshift vessel towards the larger rocks downstream, where the water formed small waterfalls that would be fatal for anyone who was unconscious. Without thinking about the risks, Lily waded into the water up to her chest, feeling the force of the current pull at her thin legs. The distance to the vessel seemed immense for a child her age, but she stretched out her arms and managed to grab one of the ropes still hanging from the side of the wrecked craft. With surprising strength for her size, she began to pull the improvised raft towards the shore. The older man, whom she didn't know, was Harrison Croft, the owner of the most prosperous construction company in the region, was unconscious with a head wound that was still bleeding slowly. Beside him, protected by the man's arms even in his unconsciousness, was a baby of about 8 months, also unconscious, but apparently without serious injuries. Lily fought the current for several minutes that felt like hours, her small muscles trembling with the effort. When she finally managed to drag the vessel into shallower water, she herself was exhausted and soaked. She climbed onto the muddy bank and watched the two strangers, not knowing exactly what to do next. The baby was the first to move, letting out a weak cry that made Lily's heart ache. She approached carefully and noticed the child was cold, shivering in his wet clothes. Without hesitation, she took off her own dirty but dry t-shirt and wrapped the baby in it, whispering words of comfort the same way her grandmother Grace used to do with her before she passed away forever, 3 months ago. The man remained motionless, breathing erratically. Lily gently touched his face and noticed he was very pale. Although she was just a child, she knew he needed urgent medical help. She looked around, trying to decide what to do. The nearest road was almost a mile away, and she couldn't carry either the man or the baby that far. It was then that she heard the sound of an engine approaching on the dirt road that cut through the farm. Without a second thought, Lily picked up the baby and ran towards the noise, screaming for help with all the strength she could muster. Her high-pitched cries echoed through the muggy afternoon until she finally saw a pickup truck screech to a halt. Two men got out of the vehicle and ran towards her when they saw the scene, a small, dirty girl holding a wet baby and pointing desperately towards the riverbank where the unconscious man lay. The next few minutes were a whirlwind of activity as the men carried Harrison to the truck, and one of them called for an ambulance on a cell phone. Lily stayed by their side throughout the process, refusing to let go of the baby until the paramedics arrived and took over. When she finally handed the child to the professionals, her small fingers were stiff from holding on so tightly as if she feared something terrible would happen if she let him go. As the ambulance sped off towards Clearwater General Hospital, with its sirens cutting through the afternoon air, Lily stood on the riverbank, watching the lights disappear. Only then did she realize she had lost her rag doll during the rescue. She searched frantically among the rocks and mud until she found it caught on a branch near the water. When she picked up the soaked doll, she noticed that a part of the fabric had torn during the confusion, letting out some of the old cotton stuffing. Still, she hugged it to her chest as she always did when she felt scared or alone. It was all that was left of the life she had with her grandmother, the only person who had ever shown her true love. The sun began to set as Lily walked slowly back to where she had left the sack of cans. She knew Arthur would be furious to find out she had wasted precious work time, especially since the bag was still only half full, but something inside her felt different, as if she had done something important, something her grandmother would be proud of. As she resumed her scavenging for recyclables under the orange glow of twilight, Lily had no way of knowing that she had just saved the life of one of the most powerful men in the region, nor that this simple, brave act would trigger a series of events that would not only change her own life, but would also reveal dark secrets that some people would do anything to keep buried forever. 3 days had passed since the accident on the Blackwater. River and Clearwater General Hospital was buzzing with journalists and onlookers trying to get information about Harrison Croft's condition. The businessman had woken up the previous morning, disoriented and with a severe concussion, but alive thanks to the intervention of a mysterious child whom no one could locate. Eleanor Croft, 58, remained by her husband's bedside, her eyes red from crying. Her hands trembled as she held Harrison's, still unable to fully process how she had lost control of the situation that had led her to back out of the boat trip at the last minute. Guilt consumed her, especially because she knew her absence had not been a coincidence. "The baby, is Benjamin okay?" were Harrison's first coherent words upon regaining consciousness. Eleanor nodded, pointing to the makeshift crib next to the bed, where the 8-month-old boy slept peacefully, with no apparent lasting effects from the accident that could have cost them both their lives. Dr. Michael Evans, the physician in charge of the case, explained that both Harrison and Benjamin had suffered mild hypothermia and that the businessman had a concussion, but that they would make a full recovery. What puzzled everyone was how they had managed to survive in the water for so long, and most importantly, how they had reached the shore. According to the people who brought them to the hospital, a little girl saved them, the doctor explained, consulting his notes. But when the ambulance arrived, she had disappeared. The men who helped with the rescue said she looked about 4 years old, was very dirty, and carried a rag doll. Harrison closed his eyes, trying to remember the moments before the accident. Fragments of memories slowly returned. The heated argument with Eleanor the morning of the trip, her decision not to board, the strange sound from the boat's engine just before everything went dark, but he couldn't remember any child. "I need to find that girl," Harrison murmured, trying to sit up despite his wife's protests. "She saved our lives. I need to thank her. I need to—" "Harrison, you need to rest," Eleanor interrupted, but there was something in her voice that sounded forced, as if she were hiding something important. The girl has probably gone home to her parents. You can look for her when you've recovered. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Lily was facing the consequences of losing half a day's work. Arthur had come home the previous night to find the sack of cans only partially full, and his rage was immediate and violent. The girl spent the night locked in the small room that served as her bedroom, without dinner and with her stomach growling from hunger. "Useless brat," Arthur grumbled as he counted the coins he had made from selling the materials. "Can't even scavenge junk properly. Your grandmother spoiled you rotten. That's why you're good for nothing." Lily remained silent, hugging her torn doll, trying not to cry. She knew that tears only made Arthur angrier, and she had learned it was better to accept the punishments in silence, but this time, something inside her felt different. The image of the baby she had saved remained vivid in her memory, as did the feeling of having done something good, something important. The next morning, Arthur woke her before dawn with a rough shove. "Today you work all day. I want that bag full of cans, and on top of that, you're going to collect cardboard from around the market. If you don't bring back at least $15 by tonight, you're sleeping in the yard." Lily took the empty sack and her doll, starting another journey through the dusty streets of Clearwater. But as she passed near the hospital, something caught her attention. There were several people at the entrance, some with cameras, others talking excitedly. Curious, she got close enough to hear snippets of conversation. The businessman who almost drowned in the river. A child saved him and the baby. Nobody knows who the girl is. Lily's heart raced as she realized they were talking about what had happened 3 days earlier. She had saved important people, and now everyone was looking for her. For a moment, she felt a pang of pride, a feeling she hadn't experienced since her grandmother Grace was alive. But soon, fear took over. What if Arthur found out? What if he got even angrier that she had gotten involved in something that was none of her business? She decided to move away from the hospital quickly and continue her work, trying to forget what she had heard. Meanwhile, Harrison had convinced the doctor to discharge him early against medical advice. His obsession with finding the girl who had saved them grew with each passing hour, fueled not only by gratitude, but by a strange feeling that there was more to the accident. "Robert," Harrison said over the phone, speaking to Robert Cole, his lawyer and longtime friend. "I need you to hire a private investigator. I want to find a girl, about 4 years old, who lives in the area of the old Blackwood farm." "Harrison, are you sure this is necessary?" Robert asked, concerned about his friend's mental state. "Maybe it's better for you to focus on your recovery and leave this for later." "No," Harrison replied firmly. "This child saved my life and Benjamin's life. I won't be able to rest until I thank her properly." What Harrison didn't know was that his decision to investigate would attract the attention of people who preferred to keep certain things hidden. Alderman Alistair Finch, 58, and an influential figure in local politics, received a troubling phone call from one of his informants about the businessman's movements. "He's asking a lot of questions about a girl in the farm area," the voice on the other end of the line reported. "It could be dangerous if he starts poking around where he shouldn't." Alistair remained silent for a few seconds, processing the information. The Blackwood farm area was sensitive territory for his business, especially considering the discreet meetings that regularly took place there. A detailed investigation could expose more than he was willing to risk. "Keep me informed of his every move," Alistair instructed, "and find out everything you can about this girl. If she saw something she shouldn't have." 3 days later, the private investigator hired by Harrison began asking questions in the farm area. He spoke with locals, shopkeepers, and workers, always describing a small, dirty girl who carried a rag doll. The answers were vague until he arrived at Joe's place, a bar near the entrance to the farm. "Oh, that must be Lily," the owner said, wiping a glass as he spoke. "Grace's granddaughter, who passed away about 3 months ago. Now the girl stays with Arthur, that scavenger who lives in the yellow house at the end of Church Street." "Arthur?" the investigator asked, jotting down the name. "Is he related to the girl?" "Not that I know of. I think he just took her in because there was no one else. But what I can tell you is that the girl has changed a lot since her grandmother died. She used to be a normal kid, played, smiled. Now I only see her scavenging in the streets, always alone." The information reached Harrison the same day, and he felt a mix of relief and concern. He finally had a concrete lead on his savior, but the circumstances described deeply disturbed him. A 4-year-old child living with a stranger, working on the streets, with no real family to protect her. That night, Harrison made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, he would go to Arthur's house himself to meet Lily and find out how he could help her. But he had no idea that his actions were being monitored, nor that his search for an innocent child was about to uncover secrets that very powerful people would kill to protect. Thursday morning dawned overcast as Harrison parked his imported car on the dirt road, where Arthur's small yellow house stood. The contrast between the luxury vehicle and the evident poverty of the place was stark. Simple, unfinished brick houses lined the narrow street, where children played with pieces of wood and empty cans. Harrison took a deep breath before getting out of the car, still feeling slight dizziness from the concussion. He had mentally rehearsed what he would say when he met the girl who had saved his life, but now that he was here, the words seemed inadequate. "How do you thank a 4-year-old child for such a brave act?" The door of the yellow house opened before he could even knock. Arthur appeared on the threshold, his small, suspicious eyes scanning the well-dressed man before him. The 55-year-old scavenger had lived long enough to know that rich people didn't show up in his neighborhood by chance. "Are you lost?" Arthur asked, crossing his arms over his chest. His clothes were stained with grease and dirt, and the smell of cheap alcohol emanated from his breath, even though it was still early. "Actually, I'm looking for a girl named Lily," Harrison replied politely. "I believe she lives here with you." Arthur's face immediately hardened. "Who's asking? Did she do something wrong?" "On the contrary," Harrison said, trying to convey a sense of calm. "She saved my life a few days ago, in the river. I'd like to thank her personally." Arthur narrowed his eyes, processing the information. He had heard vague comments about an accident involving a rich businessman, but hadn't connected Lily to the incident. Now, seeing the man in front of him, he began to see financial possibilities. "Ah, you're the guy from the accident," he said, subtly changing his tone. Come in, come in. Lily's in the back, sorting materials to sell." Harrison followed Arthur through the interior of the house, noting the extreme poverty of the environment. Old, broken furniture occupied the few rooms, and the smell of dampness and spoiled food permeated the air. His anguish grew as he imagined a 4-year-old child living in these conditions. In the backyard, Lily was crouched, separating pieces of metal from a pile of trash, her rag doll tied to her waist as always. When she saw the strange man appear behind Arthur, she instinctively recoiled, her large, dark eyes showing the fear she had learned to feel in the presence of strangers. "Lily," Arthur said with false kindness, "this gentleman wants to talk to you." Harrison knelt down to be at the girl's level, keeping his distance so as not to frighten her further. Up close, he could see the marks of a hard life on her small face, the torn, dirty clothes, the bare feet with premature calluses, the excessive thinness that indicated malnutrition. "Hi, Lily," he said softly. "My name is Harrison. Do you remember helping a man and a baby in the river a few days ago?" Lily looked at Arthur before answering, as if needing permission to speak. He made an impatient gesture with his head, and she nodded shyly. "I remember," she murmured, her voice almost inaudible. "That man was me, and the baby was my son Benjamin," Harrison continued, feeling emotion rise in his throat. "You saved our lives. If it weren't for you, we would have—" He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Lily watched him with curiosity, as if she didn't fully understand the importance of what she had done. "Is the baby okay?" she asked, showing a genuine concern that deeply touched Harrison. "He is, thanks to you," he replied, taking his phone out of his pocket. "Want to see a picture of him?" Lily approached hesitantly and looked at the phone screen where Benjamin appeared, smiling in his hospital crib. A small smile crossed her face, the first Harrison had seen since he arrived. "He's chubby," she said, and for the first time, her voice sounded like a normal child's, not like someone prematurely aged by suffering. Arthur watched the interaction with growing interest. There was something in the way the rich man looked at Lily that suggested significant financial opportunities. He decided to intervene. "Lily is a very good girl," he said, placing a heavy hand on the child's shoulder, who flinched under the touch. "I've been taking good care of her since her grandmother died, but it's not easy, you know. A child is a lot of work, a lot of expense." Harrison immediately saw the intention behind the words and felt nauseated. It was obvious that Arthur saw Lily as a source of income, not as a child who needed care. Indignation grew inside him, but he maintained his composure. "I understand," Harrison said, standing up. "I'd like to do something to repay what Lily did for me and my family. Perhaps we can talk about that." Of course," Arthur replied eagerly. "Let's go inside." While the two men went into the house to talk, Lily remained in the yard trying to process what had happened. The man she had saved had looked for her, had spoken to her with kindness, had shown her the baby was okay. It was a strange and confusing feeling because it had been a long time since anyone had shown any genuine interest in her. Inside the house, Harrison got straight to the point. "I want to help Lily. She clearly needs medical care, education, proper clothes. I'm willing to cover these costs." Arthur's eyes gleamed with greed. "You're very generous. The girl really needs a lot of things. Clothes, food, medicine. It's very expensive to keep a child these days." "I'd like to take Lily to a doctor today," Harrison said, "and then we'll buy her some clothes and shoes. You can come along, of course." Arthur hesitated for a moment, calculating the risks and benefits. On one hand, he didn't want to lose control over Lily, who represented a steady source of income through child labor. On the other hand, if he could establish a financial relationship with this rich man, he could make much more money. "Could be," he said finally, "but I want to make it clear that I'm her legal guardian. Anything has to go through me." "I understand perfectly," Harrison replied, though internally he was planning to verify the truth of that statement. "Can we leave now?" 2 hours later, in the office of Dr. Peter Adams, a private pediatrician in Clearwater, Lily was undergoing a complete medical examination. The doctor had frowned several times during the exam, noting clear signs of malnutrition, small scars that suggested accidents or neglect, and delayed physical development for her age. "The child is significantly underweight," the doctor explained to Harrison in private while Lily got dressed with the help of a nurse. "There are signs of chronic nutritional deficiency and some issues that concern me." "What kind of issues?" Harrison asked, his anguish growing. "Small, old injuries that weren't properly treated, an excessively defensive posture for a child this age, and some signs that might indicate, well, that she hasn't always been treated with kindness." Harrison felt anger boil inside him. It was becoming clearer that Lily was living in a situation of neglect, if not worse. He decided he had to act, but he knew he had to be careful not to put the girl in more danger. "Doctor, what does she need to recover? Proper nutrition, regular medical care, a stable and loving environment, and most importantly, protection from whatever situation caused these conditions." When they left the office, Harrison watched how Lily walked close to him, keeping her distance from Arthur. It was a subtle but revealing detail. The child instinctively sought protection from the man who had treated her with kindness, avoiding the one who clearly intimidated her. "Now let's buy you some new clothes," Harrison said to Lily, who was holding her torn doll tightly. "And shoes, too." "Shoes?" she asked, as if the word was strange. "Real ones." "Real ones," Harrison confirmed, his heart breaking as he realized that the simple promise of shoes was something extraordinary in this child's life. As they walked towards the shops in downtown Clearwater, Harrison didn't know he was being watched by attentive eyes. Alderman Alistair Finch had instructed some of his informants to monitor the businessman's movements, and the appearance of a child in his company had sparked immediate interest. What had started as a simple mission of gratitude was turning into something much more complex and dangerous, especially because Lily carried in her child's memory information that could destroy careers and expose secrets that had cost a great deal to keep hidden. The department store in downtown Clearwater had never had a customer like Lily. The 4-year-old girl entered hesitantly, clutching her rag doll to her chest, her wide eyes scanning the shelves full of colorful clothes and shiny toys. It was as if she had entered a completely different world from her own. "You can choose whatever you like," Harrison said gently, watching as she delicately touched a blue dress as if it were something too fragile for her small hands. Arthur remained close, but Harrison noticed how he avoided touching Lily in front of other people, maintaining a facade of a caring guardian that couldn't completely hide his true nature. "She's not used to these things," Arthur murmured to the saleswoman, trying to sound like a concerned tutor. "Lost her parents very young, poor thing." The saleswoman, a middle-aged lady named Ms. Carroll, watched the scene with growing suspicion. In her 20 years working at the store, she had developed an instinct for strange situations, and something about this dynamic didn't feel right. "How old are you, dear?" Ms. Carroll asked Lily directly, crouching down to be at the girl's level. "4," Lily replied in a low voice, glancing quickly at Arthur as if needing permission to speak. "And you live with your uncle?" the saleswoman continued, noticing the tension that settled on Arthur's face. "He's not my uncle," Lily said innocently. "He just takes care of me after Grandma Grace went away." The silence that followed was heavy. Harrison noticed Arthur's lie and felt his anger rise again, but he kept his cool so as not to scare Lily. Ms. Carroll exchanged a meaningful look with him, communicating without words that she had also noticed the inconsistencies. "Well," Harrison said, changing the subject, "let's find some pretty clothes for you, Lily, and shoes too." Over the next hour, Lily tried on clothes for the first time in her life. Each new item was a discovery: dresses that weren't torn, shoes that fit her small feet perfectly, clean and soft socks. When she looked at herself in the mirror wearing a new outfit, her eyes filled with tears. "Am I pretty?" she asked Harrison shyly. "You're beautiful," he replied, feeling a tightness in his heart. "But you've always been beautiful, Lily. The new clothes just make you feel better." While paying for the purchases, Harrison spoke, discreetly with Ms. Carroll. "Did you notice anything strange about this child's situation?" "I did," she replied softly. "I've worked here a long time, and I've seen many families. That girl is afraid of him, it's not hard to see. And the way he looks at her, it's not how a guardian should look. What do you suggest?" "If I were you, I'd look into the legal situation of this child, and maybe talk to social services." Ms. Carroll's words echoed in Harrison's mind on the way back. He had decided to take Lily and Arthur to lunch at a restaurant, but now his mind was focused on how to protect the girl from a situation that was clearly unsafe for her. At the restaurant, Lily ate with a desperate hunger that broke Harrison's heart. It was obvious she wasn't used to regular, nutritious meals. Arthur, on the other hand, drank beer after beer while talking about the difficulties of raising a child alone. "You have no idea how hard it is," he said, his voice already slurred from the alcohol. "The girl is trouble, doesn't want to obey, always running off to play when she should be working." "Working?" Harrison asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. "Yeah, scavenging for recyclables. She has to help with the household expenses. I can't support her for free." Harrison looked at Lily, who was focused on her food, trying to ignore the adults' conversation. With every word from Arthur, it became clearer that the situation was worse than he had imagined. After lunch, while Arthur went to the restroom, Harrison took the opportunity to talk to Lily alone. "Do you like living with Arthur?" he asked carefully. Lily stopped playing with her doll and looked around to make sure they were alone. "He gets mad when I don't work," she whispered, "and sometimes he drinks those bottles and yells a lot. Are you afraid of him?" She nodded slowly, her large eyes filling with tears. "But I can't leave. I have nowhere to go." "What if I told you there are safe places where children can stay when they don't have family? Like with Grandma Grace?" she asked hopefully. "Even better. People who take care of children because they want to help them, not because they want them to work." When Arthur returned, clearly intoxicated, Harrison made a decision. "Arthur, I think it's best if you two head home now. It's getting late." "But aren't you going to give a little something for the girl's expenses?" Arthur asked, trying to hide his greed. "I will, but first I need to take care of a few things. I'll see you tomorrow." On the way back to the yellow house, Harrison watched as Lily became progressively more tense as they got closer. When they arrived, she got out of the car reluctantly, as if she were returning to a prison. "Lily," Harrison said before she went into the house, "if you ever need help, I live at 247 Palm Street. It's a big house with a green gate. Can you remember that?" She repeated the address softly, memorizing every word. "Big house, green gate, 247 Palm Street. That's right. And if you need me, you can look for me." That night, Harrison couldn't sleep. He called Robert Cole, his lawyer, even though it was late. "Robert, I need to know about the rights of a child who is living with someone who is not a relative and who is neglecting her." "Harrison, what's going on?" "The girl who saved me. She's in a terrible situation. The man who cares for her makes her work on the streets. It's clear there's neglect, possibly abuse." "This is very serious. Do you have evidence?" "I have the testimony of several people and my own observations." "Robert, this child saved my life. I can't just ignore what she's going through." "I understand. I'll research the legal procedures for cases like this." "But Harrison, meddling in child custody situations is complicated. You need to be prepared for the consequences." While Harrison planned ways to help Lily on the other side of town, a very different conversation was taking place. Alderman Alistair Finch was meeting with Everett Shaw, his 46-year-old accountant, in a back room of a closed restaurant. "The businessman is asking a lot of questions about the farm area," Everett reported, "and now he's shown up with a child. This could be problematic." "Problematic how?" Alistair asked, drumming his fingers nervously on the table. "If he starts digging deep in that area, he could find out about our meetings, and if the child witnessed something." Alistair fell silent for a few moments, processing the implications. The secret meetings in the Blackwood Farm area were crucial to his illegal businesses, and any exposure would be catastrophic. "Find out everything about this child," he ordered. "Who she is, where she lives, what she might have seen, and keep surveillance on Harrison Croft. And if she really knows something compromising, then we'll have to take measures to protect our interests, Alistair replied coldly. Meanwhile, in the yellow house, Lily lay on her makeshift bed, hugging her rag doll and the new clothes Harrison had bought. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope. There was someone in the world who cared about her, someone who had treated her with kindness, but she didn't know that her simple presence in that area 3 weeks ago had made her a witness to secrets that powerful men would do anything to keep hidden, nor that her rescue of Harrison had triggered a series of events that would soon put her life in even greater danger. Friday morning brought a discovery that would change everything. Prudence Hayes, a 42-year-old social worker, had arrived at the Clearwater Department of Social Services office with a pile of old documents she needed to organize when she found a yellowed folder at the back of a file cabinet. The name on the label made her stop: Miller Family, Rose and Lily. Prudence knew that name well. Rose Miller had been her best friend during their college years before they moved to different cities and lost touch. They had worked together on a project about children's rights, and Rose always talked about her dream of working with orphaned children. Opening the folder with trembling hands, Prudence found documents that left her in shock. There were records of an investigation into irregularities at the St. Vincent's orphanage, where Rose had worked as a cook. The documents indicated suspicions of falsified adoption papers and the funneling of children to families who paid substantial amounts under the table. The most disturbing thing was a handwritten letter dated 2 years prior, addressed specifically to her, for Prudence Hayes, in case something happens to me. The handwriting was unmistakably Rose's. With a racing heart, Prudence opened the letter and read the words her friend had written in desperation. "Prue, if you're reading this, it means they found out I know too much. I found evidence that children are being sold through the orphanage. Fake documents, bribes, to officials, all run by very powerful people. My daughter Lily is in danger. If something happens to me, please find her and protect her. She's all I have in the world." Prudence's hands trembled as she continued to read. The letter contained names, dates, and references to secret meetings in the Blackwood Farm area. Rose had discovered that Alderman Alistair Finch was the head of the entire operation, using the orphanage as a front for a much larger corruption scheme. "They threatened me yesterday," the letter continued. "They said if I said anything, something terrible would happen to Lily. I'm going to have to pretend to disappear to protect my daughter. I'll leave her with my mother, Grace. But if something happens to my mom too, Lily will be alone. Please, Prue, you're the only person I trust." Prudence had to sit down to process the information. Her friend had disappeared to protect her own daughter, and now that child was somewhere, possibly in danger. She immediately picked up the phone and called the records department. "I need information on a minor named Lily Miller, daughter of Rose Miller," she said urgently. "It's an emergency." While she waited for the information, Prudence reread the letter several times, noticing details she had missed in the first reading. Rose mentioned that she had photographed compromising documents and hidden them in a safe place, but she didn't reveal where. The phone rang 40 minutes later. "Prudence, I found the record. The minor Lily Miller is in the care of a certain Arthur Gable since the death of her grandmother, Grace Miller, 3 months ago, but there's no formal legal guardianship documentation." "Address?" Prudence asked, already grabbing her car keys. "89 Church Street, the Yellow House." Prudence ran out of the office, her mind processing the terrible implications of the situation. Her best friend's daughter was living with a stranger without legal documentation, and there was evidence that she might be connected to a very dangerous corruption scheme. Meanwhile, at Croft Construction, Harrison was meeting with Robert when his cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Mr. Croft," a female voice said on the other end of the line. My name is Prudence Hayes. I'm a social worker. I need to speak with you urgently about a child named Lily Miller. Harrison almost dropped the phone. How do you know about Lily? It's a long story. Can I meet you now? It's extremely important. An hour later, Harrison and Robert were in Prudence's office listening to a story that seemed like something out of a movie. The social worker had explained her connection to Rose and showed them the revealing letter. So Lily's mother is alive? Harrison asked, trying to process the information. According to the letter, she faked her disappearance to protect her daughter. But I don't know where she is now, Prudence replied. The important thing is that Lily may be in much greater danger than we imagined. Robert was flipping through the documents in the folder. These papers mention meetings at the Blackwood farm. Harrison, wasn't that where Lily found you? Exactly. And if she witnessed one of those meetings, then she's a witness, Prudence completed. And witnesses can be dangerous for people like Alistair Finch. At that moment, the three of them understood that the situation was much more complex and dangerous than they had imagined. Lily was not just a neglected child who needed help. She was potentially the key to exposing a corruption scheme involving very powerful people. We need to get her out of there. Immediately, Harrison said, standing up. If Finch finds out we're investigating, it might already be too late, Prudence interrupted, picking up her phone. I'm calling Arthur's house. The phone rang several times without an answer. Prudence felt a chill in her stomach and tried again. Still no answer. Let's go there, Harrison decided. Now. The three of them ran out of the office, but when they arrived at Church Street, they found the yellow house with its windows shut and apparently empty. Neighbors reported that they had seen Arthur leave early that morning with a suitcase, but no one had seen Lily. He's fled, Robert murmured, and he took the girl. Prudence knocked on the door insistently but got no response. It was then that an elderly neighbor approached. If you're looking for Arthur, he left early with the girl, she said. He seemed nervous, looking all around, said he was going to visit his sister in the countryside. His sister? Prudence asked. Yes, Martha. She lives on a small farm about 20 miles from here, near the county line with Asheville. As they ran to their cars, Harrison couldn't stop thinking that he had failed Lily. The girl had trusted him, and now she was in greater danger because of his interference. This is my fault, he said to Robert during the drive. If I hadn't asked so many questions, hadn't drawn attention. It's not your fault, Robert replied firmly. You were trying to help a child. But neither Harrison nor Robert knew that at that very moment, in a private room at a central Clearwater restaurant, Alistair Finch was giving very specific instructions to two of his thugs. The child saw things she shouldn't have, he said coldly, and now she's starting to attract the attention of people who can cause problems for our business. What do you want us to do? One of the men asked. Find the girl before these investigators do. And if she really knows anything about our operations. Alistair didn't need to finish the sentence. The message was clear. Meanwhile, at Martha's isolated homestead, Lily was hidden in a small room at the back of the house, confused and frightened. Arthur had arrived nervously that morning, talking about dangerous people who were asking questions about her. You can't leave here, he had said threateningly, and if anyone comes looking, you're not here. Understand? Lily hugged her rag doll and the new clothes Harrison had bought, trying to understand why her life had become even more frightening. She just wanted to go home and find the kind man who had promised to help her, but she was beginning to realize she might never see him again. Martha Gable's homestead was at the end of a dusty dirt road, surrounded by cornfields that stretched as far as the eye could see. The isolated property was perfect for hiding someone, and Arthur knew this when he decided to take Lily there the night before. Martha, Arthur's younger sister was a 48-year-old woman who had spent her life tending to the rural property left by their parents. Unlike her brother, she had a kinder heart, but she also lived in fear of the constant threats Arthur brought into her life. "Why did you bring the girl here?" Martha asked, watching Lily through the window of the room where they had locked her. "And why is she wearing expensive clothes? Where did you get the money for that?" "Don't ask questions," Arthur replied nervously, drinking cheap whiskey straight from the bottle, even though it was mid-afternoon. "I just need her to stay hidden here for a few days until things calm down." "What things, Arthur? What have you gotten yourself into this time?" "There are some important guys asking questions about her, saying she saw things she shouldn't have. If they find the girl—" Martha felt a shiver run down her spine. She had known her brother long enough to know when he was involved in something dangerous, and this time it seemed much worse than his usual petty scams. "Saw what? She's just a 4-year-old child. Remember the times I took her to scavenge in the farm area? It seems that on one of those days she witnessed a meeting she wasn't supposed to see." While the siblings talked in the kitchen, Lily tried to understand where she was. The room was small but clean, very different from the dirty place where she lived with Arthur. Through the single window, she could see an orchard with fruit-laden trees and chickens pecking freely in the yard. But what caught her attention most was a conversation she could overhear through the thin walls. 2 unknown male voices had arrived and were talking to Arthur outside the house. "Where's the child?" a rough voice asked. "What child?" Arthur tried to play dumb, but his voice was visibly trembling. "Don't play games with us, Arthur. We know you brought the Miller girl here. The boss wants to have a word with her." Lily hid under the bed when she heard heavy footsteps approaching the house. Her heart was beating so fast, she was afraid they could hear it. She hugged her rag doll tightly, remembering Harrison's kind words and wishing she were back with him. "She's not here," Arthur lied, but his voice was growing more desperate. "I took her somewhere, else a place you'll never find." "That's too bad for you, Arthur. Mr. Finch doesn't like it when people lie to him." It was then that Lily heard a sound that terrified her, the noise of someone being violently shoved against the wall of the house. Arthur groaned in pain, and she could hear Martha crying and begging them to stop hurting her brother. "Last chance," the threatening voice said. "Where's the girl?" I can't say," Arthur whispered. "If I give her up, he'll kill me too." Meanwhile, 15 miles away, Harrison, Robert, and Prudence had reached a fork in the road. They weren't sure which direction to take to find Martha's homestead, and time was running out. "Let's ask at that general store over there," Prudence suggested, pointing to a small rural shop on the side of the road. The store's owner, an elderly man of about 70, knew the area well. "Martha's homestead is about 5 miles in that direction," he said, pointing to a narrow dirt road. "But be careful. I saw some strange cars heading up there a little while ago. City folk, by the looks of it." The 3 exchanged worried glances. If other cars had already gone to the homestead, it could mean they weren't the only ones looking for Lily. "How many cars?" Robert asked. 2. One was a black pickup, the other a dark sedan. "Not from around here, I can guarantee that." Harrison's stomach turned. If Finch had found out where Lily was hidden, the girl's situation had become desperate. "Let's go, fast," he said, running back to the car. During the drive down the dusty road, Harrison couldn't stop thinking that he was failing someone who needed him again. First, he had failed to protect his family in the boat accident, and now he was failing to protect the child who had saved his life. "Stop blaming yourself," Prudence said, as if she could read his thoughts. "We're doing everything we can." "Is it enough?" he asked, accelerating the car as much as the road would allow. When they finally spotted the homestead, they saw the 2 cars mentioned by the store owner parked in front of the house. There were raised voices coming from inside the property, and it was clearly not a friendly situation. "Let's approach slowly," Robert whispered. "We need to assess the situation before we act." The three of them got out of the car silently and approached the house through the orchard, using the trees for cover. From outside the building, they could see two large, intimidating men pressing Arthur against the wall, while Martha cried, sitting on the entrance step, "If you don't tell us where the girl is, we'll start hurting your sister too," one of the men threatened, turning towards Martha. "No!" Arthur shouted. "She has nothing to do with this." "Then tell us where you hid the child." It was at that moment that Prudence made a courageous decision. As a social worker, she had dealt with dangerous situations involving children before, and she knew that sometimes you had to act quickly. "Police!" she shouted from the middle of the orchard, pretending to be more than one person. "Surround the property!" The two thugs were momentarily startled, looking around for the source of the voices. This moment of distraction was enough for Harrison and Robert to move to better positions, surrounding the men from different sides. Arthur took advantage of the confusion to break free and run towards the house. "Martha!" he yelled. "The girl is in the back room. Get her out of there!" Inside the house, Lily had heard the screams and was more terrified than ever. When Martha burst into the room, the girl shrank even further under the bed. "Come on, sweetie," Martha said gently, extending her hand. "We have to get out of here now." "I want Mr. Harrison," Lily cried. "He promised he would help me." "He's here," Martha said, picking the girl up in her arms. "He came to get you." Outside, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The two thugs had realized they were only three people, not a police operation, and were becoming aggressive again. "Get out of there!" one of them shouted. "You're meddling in things that are none of your business." "The only thing that's our business is protecting an innocent child," Harrison replied, stepping out from behind a tree with his hands up but firm in his stance. It was then that something unexpected happened. A third car arrived at the property at high speed, kicking up a cloud of dust. A woman of about 40, thin and nervous, got out. Lily recognized her immediately, even though she hadn't seen her for 2 long years. "Rose," Prudence whispered, not believing what she was seeing. Lily's mother had returned, and her arrival would completely change the course of this dangerous confrontation, bringing with her secrets no one imagined and revelations that would put all their lives in even greater risk. The silence that fell over the homestead when Rose Miller got out of the car was deafening. Everyone present watched her with expressions ranging from shock and relief to terror. The woman who had mysteriously disappeared 2 years ago was there, alive, but visibly transformed by pain and constant fear. "Lily!" Rose shouted, running towards the house where Martha held her daughter in her arms. The 4-year-old girl stood still for a few seconds, as if unable to process that her mother was really there. Then her eyes filled with tears, and she stretched her little arms towards Rose. "Mommy," she whispered, her small voice laden with 2 years of longing and confusion. Alistair's two thugs looked at each other, clearly not expecting this turn of events. One of them took out his phone and started dialing a number, probably to report the situation to his boss. "Nobody move!" Rose shouted, surprising everyone with the firmness in her voice. "You're not touching my daughter." "Ma'am, you don't understand the situation," one of the men said, trying to maintain a threatening tone despite his obvious confusion. "This child witnessed things that—" "I know exactly what she witnessed," Rose interrupted, pulling a thick envelope from her purse, "because I have proof of everything you've been doing." Harrison approached cautiously, trying to understand the dynamic that had been established. "Rose, I'm Harrison Croft. Your daughter saved my life." Rose looked at him with recognition. "I know who you are. I read about the accident in the papers, and I know you've been trying to help Lily." "Then why didn't you contact me sooner?" "Because I had to protect her," Rose replied, hugging Lily to her chest. "But I can't stay hidden anymore. I found out Alistair ordered them to hurt my daughter." Prudence approached slowly, tears streaming down her face. "Rose, it's me, Prue. I found your letter." "Prue?" Rose looked at her with surprise and relief. "Thank God you found it. That means that we can finally stop this charade," a new voice said, cutting through the conversation. Everyone turned to see Everett Shaw, Alistair's accountant, stepping out from behind one of the cars. His expression was a mixture of exhaustion and determination that surprised the thugs, who clearly hadn't expected to see him there. "Mr. Shaw," one of the men said, confused, "you're not supposed to..." "Supposed to what? Keep pretending I don't know you came here to hurt a child." Everett approached the group, his hands trembling slightly. "I'm tired of this life, tired of being an accomplice to horrible things." Rose studied the accountant with suspicion. "You work for Alistair. Why should I trust you?" "Because," Everett said, taking a deep breath, "Lily is my great-niece." The shock of this revelation hit everyone like a bolt of lightning. Rose almost let her daughter slip from her arms. Prudence covered her mouth with her hands, and even the thugs seemed confused. "What do you mean?" Rose asked, her voice just a whisper. "Your mother, Grace Miller, was my mother's sister. We were cousins, Rose. We drifted apart when I started working for Alistair, because I knew my family wouldn't approve of the things I was doing." Everett moved closer, ignoring the threatening glares of the thugs. "When I found out that the child Alistair wanted to eliminate was my cousin's daughter, I couldn't stay silent anymore." "You knew Rose was alive this whole time?" Harrison asked. "I did, and I helped her stay hidden, sending money through third parties. But when I heard Alistair had found out about Lily..." "Wait," interrupted Robert, who had remained quiet, observing the situation. "You said you helped Rose hide. That means you have information about Alistair's entire operation." Everett nodded heavily. "I have all the records. Bank accounts, falsified documents, records of the children who were sold through the orphanage, everything." One of the thugs lost his patience. "Enough talk," he shouted, advancing on. "The group. We're taking the kid and ending this." It was then that something unexpected happened. Arthur, who had remained silent, leaning against the wall of the house, placed himself in front of Lily and Rose. "No," he said, his voice surprisingly firm. "You're not touching her." "Get out of the way, Arthur," the thug threatened. "You've already caused enough trouble." "No, the girl. She saved my life once too," Arthur said, looking at Lily with an expression no one had seen before. "When I had pneumonia last year, she took care of me, gave me water, even though she was just a kid. I treated her badly because I was scared, but she never stopped being good." Lily looked at Arthur in surprise. She vaguely remembered helping him when he was sick, but she didn't understand why it was important now. The situation was growing increasingly tense when the sound of sirens began to echo in the distance. Everett smiled for the first time. "I called the police before I came here," he said, "and the newspapers too. In 10 minutes, this place will be crawling with authorities and reporters." The thugs panicked. "We have to get out of here now," one said to the other. "Not without the kid," his partner replied, pulling something from his waistband. But before he could make any threatening move, Harrison placed himself in front of Lily, Rose, and Prudence. "You'll have to go through me first." "And me," said Robert, positioning himself beside his friend. "And me," added Martha, surprising everyone with her sudden courage. "And me," finished Arthur, completing a human barrier of protection around Lily. The sound of the sirens was getting closer, and the thugs realized they had lost their chance to resolve the situation quietly. With angry curses, they ran to their cars and fled at high speed, leaving a cloud of dust behind them. When they were finally alone, Rose knelt down to Lily's level and held her daughter's little face between her hands. "Mummy is so sorry for being away from you," she said, tears streaming freely. "But I had to protect you, and it was the only way I knew how." "Are you going away again?" Lily asked, her small voice filled with fear. "Never again," Rose promised. "I will never leave you again." Prudence approached the two of them. "Rose, you know this isn't over, right? Alistair won't give up easily." "I know, but now we have help," Rose said, looking at Harrison and the others who had risked their lives to protect her daughter. "And we have the evidence to destroy Alistair once and for all." Everett approached the group. "The authorities will be here in a few minutes. I have all the documents in my car, bank records, lists of sold children, recordings of compromising conversations. Alistair won't get out of this." Harrison looked at Lily, who was clinging to her mother as if she feared she would disappear again. The girl who had saved his life was finally reunited with her family, but he knew the battle wasn't over yet. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Rose said with determination, "we end this nightmare once and for all. And Alistair will pay for every child he hurt, for every family he destroyed." The sirens were very close now, and soon the homestead would be overrun by police, journalists, and authorities. But for the first time in 2 years, Rose felt hope. Her daughter was safe in her arms. She had allies willing to fight by her side, and she finally had the chance to expose the truth that had forced her to live in hiding for so long. The Clearwater Central Police Station had never seen so much activity in a single day. Journalists crowded outside while officials came and went with stacks of documents and evidence. The story was spreading quickly. A corruption scheme involving the sale of children, misuse of public funds, and forgery of documents had been exposed thanks to the testimony of a 4-year-old girl. Inside the station, Rose was sitting in a deposition room with Lily on her lap, finally telling the whole truth about her 2 years on the run. Prudence remained by her side, offering emotional support as Detective Miles Scott recorded every detail of the story. "So you faked your own disappearance to protect your daughter?" the detective asked, trying to grasp the complexity of the situation. "I had no choice," Rose replied, stroking Lily's hair. "Alistair found out I had photographed compromising documents at the orphanage. He threatened me directly, said that if I said anything, my daughter would suffer the consequences. And during these 2 years, where were you? In Asheville, working as a cleaner for a cleaning company, using fake documents that Everett got for me. It was the only way to have an income without being discovered." The detective made careful notes. "And how did you know your daughter was in danger now?" "Everett called me last night," Rose explained. "He said Alistair had discovered that Lily witnessed one of the meetings at the farm and had ordered her to be eliminated." The word hung in the air, heavy with all the horror it represented. The detective paused his pen, clearly disturbed by the coldness with which a local politician had ordered something so terrible against a child. Across the station, in a separate room, Everett was giving his testimony while police technicians carefully examined the documents he had handed over. Whole boxes of evidence filled the room. Bank records, forged documents, lists with the names of families who had paid for illegal adoptions, recordings of compromising conversations. "Mr. Shaw," said Prosecutor Lucas Hayes, who had been urgently called to lead the case, "this evidence is enough to prosecute not only Alistair Finch, but an entire network of corruption. Why did you decide to cooperate now?" Everett looked through the room's window, where he could see Lily playing with her rag doll on her mother's lap. "Because when you find out that one of the victims is your own family, you can no longer pretend you don't see what's happening." "Are you afraid of retaliation?" "I am," Everett admitted. "But I'm more afraid of continuing to live, knowing I could have prevented an innocent child from being hurt and did nothing." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, in the private office of the city council, Alistair Finch was having one of the worst crises of his political career. His thugs had returned empty-handed, Everett had disappeared with compromising documents, and the phones wouldn't stop ringing with journalists wanting statements. "Alderman," his secretary said nervously, "there are 3 more reporters in the reception wanting to talk to you about the allegations of corruption and child trafficking." "Tell them I'm not here," Alistair replied, pouring a generous dose of whiskey into a glass, even though it was only 3 in the afternoon. "And cancel all my appointments." Prosper Thorne, the foreman of the Blackwood farm and one of Alistair's main collaborators, was sitting in an armchair across from the desk, visibly nervous. He was the one who organized the secret meetings on the property and knew his name would appear in the documents Everett had handed over to the authorities. "Alistair, we need to talk," Prosper said. "If Everett told them everything he knows, we're all in very serious trouble." "You think I don't know that?" Alistair exploded, slamming his fist on the desk. "Years of work, a perfect operation, all ruined because of a 4-year-old child." "Maybe we can still control the situation," Prosper suggested hesitantly. "If we can discredit Everett's testimony, claim he forged documents for revenge. With what money do you think we're going to hire? Lawyers for that?" Alistair asked bitterly. "The bank accounts must already be frozen. The operation is over." At that moment, the desk phone rang. Alistair hesitated before answering, but finally picked it up. "Hello? Alderman Finch?" an official voice said on the other end. "This is Detective Miles Scott. I need you to come to the station to give a statement about the accusations being made against you." "What kind of accusations?" Alistair asked, trying to sound calm. "Corruption, racketeering, forgery of public documents, and involvement in an illegal child-selling scheme. You can come voluntarily, or we can pick you up with an arrest warrant." Alistair hung up without responding. He looked at Prosper, who had turned pale upon hearing the conversation. "It's the end," Alistair muttered. "It's all over." Back at the station, Harrison was talking to Robert about the legal aspects of Lily's situation. The girl had been formally removed from Arthur's irregular custody and was temporarily under state protection, but Rose was struggling to prove her ability to care for her daughter after a 2-year absence. "The problem," Robert explained, "is that Rose has no fixed residence, formal employment, or documented stable financial conditions. From a legal standpoint, it might be difficult to get immediate custody." "But she's the biological mother," Harrison protested, "and she only fled to protect her daughter. I understand, but the legal system needs guarantees that the child will be safe and well cared for." It was then that Harrison made a decision that surprised even Robert. "What if I offered financial and structural support? I can give Rose a job at my company, help with housing, ensure Lily has all the necessary care." Robert studied his friend carefully. "Harrison, are you sure about this? It's a huge commitment. This girl saved my life. And more than that, she showed me there are still good people in the world, people willing to risk everything to help a stranger. If I can repay that, I will." At that moment, Prudence approached the 2 men. "Sorry to interrupt, but Rose would like to speak with you." In the deposition room, Rose was holding Lily, who had fallen asleep, exhausted by the traumatic day. When Harrison entered, she looked at him with deep gratitude. "Harrison, I don't know how to thank you for what you did for my daughter. If it weren't for you—" "No need to thank me," he interrupted. "Lily saved my life first. I'm just trying to pay it back. Prudence told me about your offer of help. You barely know me. Why would you do that?" Harrison looked at the girl sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. "Because when a 4-year-old has the courage to enter a dangerous river to save a stranger, it teaches you something about what really matters in life." "I accept your help," Rose said after a moment of reflection, "but on one condition. I want to work honestly to deserve this opportunity. I don't want it to be charity. It will be honest work, Harrison promised. I need someone trustworthy to manage a new social project I'm planning, a foundation to help children in vulnerable situations. Prudence smiled. That's a perfect idea. With Rose's experience and your position in the community, Harrison, you can make a huge difference. As they talked about the future, a commotion in the station's reception caught their attention. Alistair Finch had arrived accompanied by two lawyers, clearly prepared for a legal battle that would define not only his fate, but that of everyone involved in the scheme he had operated for years without being discovered. Detective Miles Scott approached the group in the deposition room. "Folks, Alistair Finch has arrived to give his statement. It would be important for you to remain here until we've finished hearing from everyone involved." "Could he try something?" Rose asked, instinctively clutching Lily to her chest. "Not here in the station," the detective assured her, "but until he's formally arrested or released, I prefer to keep all witnesses under protection." Harrison stood protectively near Rose and Lily. He knew the next few hours would be crucial in determining whether they would finally have justice and security, or if Alistair would find a way to escape the accusations and continue to be a threat to them all. The interrogation room at the station was tense as Alistair Finch sat across from Detective Miles Scott. The 58-year-old alderman tried to maintain his usual arrogant posture, but the evidence piled on the table made his situation increasingly untenable. "Alderman Finch," the detective began, opening a thick folder. "We have documents here proving suspicious bank transactions, records of unofficial meetings at the Blackwood farm, and detailed testimonies about an illegal child-selling scheme. What do you have to say about this?" "It's all lies," Alistair replied coldly, adjusting his expensive tie. "Everett Shaw is a disgruntled employee who forged documents to harm me. And as for the testimonies, they're from people with personal interests in defaming me." "And what about the child? Lily Miller witnessed your meetings at the farm." "She's a 4-year-old girl," Alistair said with disdain. "What credibility can the testimony of a child that age have? She probably confused normal work conversations with childish fantasies." On the other side of the one-way glass, Harrison watched the interrogation with growing anger. The way Alistair devalued Lily, treating her as insignificant, made his blood boil. "He's trying to discredit all of us," he muttered to Robert, who was beside him. "It's the typical strategy," the lawyer replied. "When you can't deny the evidence, you try to question the credibility of the sources." It was then that Prosecutor Lucas Hayes entered the room with an expression that was a mix of satisfaction and surprise. "Harrison, we need to talk. We found something in the documents that might interest you." "What is it?" 5 years ago, your construction company laid off an employee named Charles Miller. Do you remember him?" Harrison thought for a moment. "Charles. Yes, he was in the engineering department, an exemplary employee, but we had to make cuts due to the economic crisis." "Well, Charles Miller was Lily's father." The shock of this revelation hit Harrison like a ton of bricks. He leaned against the wall, trying to process the information. "Lily's father worked for me. And there's more," the prosecutor continued. "According to Everett's documents, Charles's layoff is what led the family into extreme poverty. Rose had to work at the orphanage to support her daughter, and that's where she discovered Alistair's scheme." "Are you saying that—" "Indirectly, I caused this whole situation?" Robert placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Harrison, you couldn't have known. It was a business decision during a crisis. But if I hadn't laid him off, Rose would never have worked at the orphanage, never would have discovered the scheme, never would have had to run away." Harrison sat down heavily in a chair. "Lily saved my life, but I destroyed hers first." At that moment, Rose appeared at the door with Lily in her arms. She had overheard part of the conversation, and her expression was a mixture of shock and understanding. "You're the Harrison Croft who laid off my husband 5 years ago?" she asked, her voice controlled but filled with emotion. Yes," Harrison admitted, unable to look her in the eye. "Rose, I didn't know that." "Charles was devastated when he lost his job," she said, approaching slowly. "He blamed himself for not being able to support his family. He started drinking, got depressed. 2 months later, he had a car accident." "Rose, I'm so sorry. If I had known that there was a little daughter involved, that your decision would destroy a family." Rose's voice was getting louder, years of pain and anger finally finding a target. Lily, frightened by the tension in her mother's voice, began to cry. "Mommy, why are you yelling at Mr. Harrison? He's nice." The child's innocence cut through Rose's anger like a blade. She looked at her daughter, then at Harrison, who was visibly shattered by the revelation. "Lily's right," she said finally, her voice calmer. "You have been nice to her. And I understand you couldn't have known about our family when you laid off Charles. That doesn't absolve me of responsibility," Harrison said, standing up to face her. "My decision destroyed your life, your family. And Lily, she saved the life of the man who ruined hers." "Maybe," Rose said after a long silence, "that's why you two met, so you could have a chance to fix what was broken." At that moment, the detective came out of the interrogation room with a frustrated expression. "Alistair is refusing to cooperate. He claims all the evidence was forged and that he doesn't recognize any of the accusations." "Now what?" asked Prudence, who had remained silent, watching the unexpected reunion between Harrison and Rose. "Now we wait for the results of the forensic analysis of the documents," the detective replied, "and we hope that Prosper Thorne, when we find him, is more cooperative than his boss." "Prosper fled?" Harrison asked. "He disappeared from the farm last night, but he can't have gone far. We've put out a search warrant." As they talked, a commotion at the station's reception caught everyone's attention. An elderly woman had arrived, accompanied by a young woman, both asking to speak to the authorities about the Alistair Finch case. "Detective," the receptionist said, "there are 2 people here who say they have important information about the alderman." The elderly woman, who identified herself as Ms. Francis, a former employee of the St. Vincent's orphanage, was visibly trembling as she began to speak. "I worked at the orphanage for 15 years, she said. "I saw many things I shouldn't have seen. Families paying extra money to expedite adoptions, documents being altered, children disappearing from the records." "Why did you never report it before?" Prosecutor Lucas asked. "Because I was afraid. Alistair made it clear that anyone who talked too much could have accidents, but when I saw on the news that you had arrested him, I decided it was time to tell the truth." The young woman accompanying her identified herself as Patricia, a former employee of the accounting firm where Everett worked. "I typed many of the documents in this investigation," she said. "I know which ones are authentic and which were altered." The new witnesses brought renewed hope to the case, with the testimonies of Miss Francis and Patricia added to Everett's evidence and Rose's testimony. Alistair's web of lies was finally beginning to unravel. "We have enough evidence to keep Alistair in custody," Prosecutor Lucas told the group. "And with these new witnesses, we can start prosecuting others involved in the scheme." "And what about security?" Harrison asked, looking at Lily, who had fallen asleep in her mother's arms. "Alistair still has people working for him. We will maintain police protection for all key witnesses until the entire network is dismantled," Detective Miles assured them. Rose looked at Harrison, who remained visibly shaken by the discovery of his indirect connection to her family's suffering. "Harrison," she said gently, "what happened in the past can't be changed. But Lily saved your life for a reason. Maybe it's so you can help save other children now. How? With that foundation you mentioned, we can work together to ensure that other families don't go through what we went through. Harrison looked at the peacefully sleeping girl, oblivious to the complexities of the adult world around her. Lily had lost her father, been separated from her mother for 2 years, suffered at the hands of Arthur, and yet had risked her own life to save a stranger. "Let's do it," he said with renewed determination. "Let's build something that honors her courage and protects other children." As they planned the future, none of them knew that Prosper Thorne was hiding in an abandoned house in the countryside, planning one last, desperate attempt to silence the witnesses before he could be captured. The battle against corruption had been won, but the war for everyone's safety was not yet over. 3 days had passed since Alistair's arrest, and the town of Clearwater was buzzing with the scandal's repercussions. Newspapers across the region featured headlines about the child-selling scheme, while authorities worked tirelessly to identify all the victims and completely dismantle the corruption network. Harrison had offered his home for Rose and Lily to stay temporarily as the apartment they lived in before the disappearance had been sold during the 2 years of absence. The mansion on Palm Street, which had echoed empty since his separation from Eleanor, was now alive again with the laughter of a child. "Daddy Harrison," Lily said that Thursday morning, using the affectionate nickname she had spontaneously created, "can I play in the garden with Benjamin?" Harrison smiled at the fond term. In just a few days, Lily had adapted to the new routine and created a special bond not only with him, but also with the 8-month-old baby who was still recovering from the trauma of the accident. "You can, my little one, but don't wander too far from the house." Eleanor, who had returned from her mysterious trip the day before, watched the interaction with a complex expression. She had been shocked to discover everything that had happened in her absence, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she carried secrets of her own. "Harrison," she said once Lily was in the garden, "we need to talk about Benjamin." "What about Benjamin?" Harrison asked, pouring coffee for his wife. "During my absence, I was investigating the circumstances of his adoption." Harrison paused with the cup in midair. "Investigating? Why?" "Because I always had suspicions about how we managed to adopt him so quickly. The process was too fast, too easy. And when I heard about Alistair's scheme..." Eleanor sat down heavily in a kitchen chair, her hands trembling. "Harrison, I found out that Benjamin was one of the children sold through the orphanage." The shock hit Harrison like a physical blow. He leaned against the kitchen counter, trying to process what he had just heard. "What do you mean? We adopted Benjamin legally through reputable lawyers. The lawyers were legitimate, but they didn't know they were being used as a front. Alistair forged documents and used respectable firms to give a legal appearance to the illegal adoptions." "Eleanor, are you sure about this?" She pulled a folder of documents from her purse. "I spent these 3 weeks in the state capitol investigating. I found Benjamin's biological mother." The silence that followed was deafening. Harrison looked through the window where Lily was playing happily with Benjamin in the garden, both oblivious to the emotional storm brewing inside the house. "His mother is alive." "She is?" "Her name is Valerie. She's 19. She was coerced into giving up her son when she was only 17. They told her he would go to a good family, but she never knew to whom." "And what does she want now?" "She wants to meet her son, but not necessarily take him from us. Valerie understands that Benjamin is well cared for, but she would like to be a part of his life in some way." Harrison sat down, trying to organize his thoughts. In 1 week, his life had been completely transformed. First, Lily had entered their lives, Then he discovered the connection to Charles Miller, and now he was facing the possibility that Benjamin, whom he loved as a son, might have to be returned to his biological mother. "What are we going to do?" he finally asked. "I don't know," Eleanor admitted, "but I think we should meet Valerie and try to find a solution that's best for Benjamin." At that moment, Rose entered the kitchen from the office where she had spent the morning working on plans for the new foundation. She immediately sensed the tension in the room. "Did something happen?" she asked. Harrison and Eleanor exchanged a look, deciding that Rose deserved to know the truth, especially considering she herself had been a victim of the same scheme. "We found out that Benjamin was also a victim of Alistair's scheme," Harrison explained. "His adoption wasn't completely legal." "Oh my God," Rose whispered, covering her mouth with her hands. "Does his biological mother know?" "She does, and she wants to meet her son," Eleanor replied. "What a terrible situation," Rose said, sitting down with them. "You love Benjamin as a son. He knows you as his parents, but the biological mother has legal rights." "Exactly," Harrison said. "And we don't know how to resolve this without someone getting hurt." It was then that the phone rang. Harrison answered, expecting another call from a journalist, but the voice on the other end made him instantly alert. "Mr. Croft, this is Detective Miles. We have a problem. Prosper Thorne has been spotted in the area near your house." "What do you mean?" "We've received reports from neighbors about a suspicious man watching your property. The description matches Prosper's. I think it's best if you leave the house until we can locate him." Harrison felt his blood run cold. "Detective, Lily is playing in the garden right now. Get out of there immediately. I'm sending a unit, but don't wait. Prosper is desperate and might try anything." Harrison hung up the phone and turned to the two women. "Prosper is in the area. We have to get out of here now." "The children!" Rose exclaimed, running towards the garden. When they reached the outside area, they found a scene that terrified them. Lily was standing motionless near the gate, with Benjamin in her arms, while Prosper Thorne was on the other side of the fence, talking to her through the iron bars. "Lily," Prosper was saying, with false kindness, "remember me? I worked at the farm where you used to collect cans." "I remember," Lily replied shyly, sensing that something was wrong but not knowing exactly what. "You saw things at the farm you shouldn't have seen, didn't you? Men talking in secret places." Lily nodded innocently, not understanding the danger of the situation. "Prosper!" Harrison shouted, running towards the gate. "Get away from the children!" Prosper turned, his face showing the desperation of a man with nothing left to lose. "Ah, the great Harrison Croft, the man who destroyed our perfect operation. Your perfect operation. Destroyed families and sold children," Harrison replied, positioning himself protectively near the gate. "And you think you're better than us?" Prosper asked bitterly. "You fired this girl's father, destroyed her family, and now you're playing the hero." "Lily, come here," Rose called gently, holding out her arms. But Prosper was getting more agitated. "The girl needs to understand that she caused problems for a lot of people, that because of her, important men are in jail." "She's a 4-year-old child," Eleanor exclaimed. "She doesn't understand any of this." "Yes, she does," Prosper insisted, "and she needs to learn there are consequences for those who meddle where they shouldn't." It was then that Prosper did something no one expected. In a swift movement, he climbed over the iron gate and dropped to the other side, now inside the property with the children. Lily, frightened, ran towards Harrison, still carrying Benjamin. Prosper tried to grab her, but Harrison threw himself between them, shielding both children with his own body. "You're not touching them," Harrison said firmly. "You ruined everything," Prosper yelled, completely losing control. "Years of work, a lifetime building something, all destroyed because of a child." At that moment, the sound of sirens began to echo in the distance. The police were coming. but Prosper was becoming increasingly desperate and unpredictable. "Lily," Harrison whispered to the girl, "when I count to 3, you run inside the house with Benjamin, okay?" Lily nodded, her large eyes showing the fear she felt, but also the trust she placed in Harrison. 1, 2. But before he could get to 3, Prosper lunged towards them, determined to silence forever the only witness who could directly link him to the exposed crimes. What happened in the next few seconds seemed to last an eternity. Prosper lunged towards Harrison and the children, but just as he was about to reach them, an unexpected figure appeared, running from the side garden of the house. Arthur Gable had arrived at the property minutes before the police, brought by a mixture of guilt and a determination to protect the girl he had mistreated for so long. When he saw Prosper threatening Lily, something inside him finally broke. "Leave her alone!" Arthur shouted, throwing himself at Prosper and tackling the man to the ground. The impact was violent. The two men rolled on the grass, fighting intensely while Harrison rushed with the children into the house. Rose and Eleanor were waiting at the door, and together they locked all entrances until the situation was resolved. "Uncle Arthur!" Lily cried through the window, watching the man who had mistreated her now risking his own safety to protect her. The fight in the garden was brief but intense. Prosper, desperate and younger, initially had the upper hand over Arthur, but the 55-year-old scavenger was fighting fueled by something more powerful than physical strength, the need for redemption. When the sirens finally reached the property's gate, they found Arthur holding Prosper down on the ground, both men panting and bruised, but with the aggressor finally subdued. Detective Miles Scott was the first out of the patrol car, followed by 4 officers who quickly took control of the situation. Prosper was handcuffed and put in the car, while Arthur received medical attention for the cuts he had sustained on his face during the fight. "Arthur," Harrison said, approaching the man still being examined by the paramedic, "why did you do that?" "Because," Arthur replied with difficulty, wiping blood from his lip, "the girl didn't deserve to go through this. She suffered enough, and it was my fault. You could have been seriously hurt. I deserved to get hurt. For months, I mistreated an innocent child, forced her to work, left her hungry." Arthur's voice broke. "When I saw someone was going to hurt her again, I couldn't just stand by." Lily had watched the whole scene from the window, and when Arthur finished speaking, she ran out of the house and hugged him, even as Rose tried to hold her back. "Thank you for protecting me," she said simply, with the purity of forgiveness that only a child possesses. Tears streamed down Arthur's bruised face. "I'm so sorry, Lily. I'm sorry for everything I did to you." "You're forgiven," she replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. While Prosper was taken to the station and Arthur received medical care, Detective Miles talked to Harrison about the case's developments. "With Prosper's arrest, we have the last pieces we needed to completely close the investigation," the detective said. "He has already confessed his involvement in the scheme and is willing to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. And Alistair, he's going to get a heavy sentence. We have enough evidence to convict him of racketeering, corruption, document forgery, and child trafficking. We're talking at least 15 years in prison." Harrison sighed in relief. "And the other children? The ones sold through the scheme?" "We are identifying all the victims. It's a long process, but with the cooperation of Everett and now Prosper, we'll be able to locate every case." It was at that moment that a van arrived at the property. A young woman of about 19 got out, accompanied by a social worker. Eleanor immediately recognized her from the photos she had seen during her investigation. "Valerie?" Eleanor asked, approaching. "Yes, that's me," the young woman replied nervously, looking around the luxurious property. I came to meet my son." The moment was delicate. Benjamin was in Rose's lap, who had offered to look after him during the incident with Prosper. The 8-month-old baby smiled happily when he saw the movement, oblivious to the emotional complexity of the situation. "This is Benjamin," Harrison said gently, taking the baby and introducing him to his biological mother. Valerie looked at the son she had been forced to give up 2 years earlier, her tears beginning to flow freely. "He's so big, so healthy." "Do you want to hold him?" Eleanor offered, overcoming her own anxiety to do the right thing. With trembling hands, Valerie held Benjamin for the first time since his birth. The baby looked at her curiously without fear and even smiled at her. "He's beautiful," Valerie whispered. "You've taken such good care of him." "Valerie," Harrison said carefully, "we want to find a solution that is best for Benjamin. He loves us as his parents, but we understand you have rights as his biological mother. I don't want to take him from you," she said surprisingly. "For these 2 years, I've been studying, working, trying to build a stable life, but I see he already has a family that loves him." "Then what would you like?" Eleanor asked. "I'd like to be part of his life, as a special aunt maybe, someone he can know and love too, but without destroying the family you've built." The proposal was unexpectedly mature and generous. Harrison and Eleanor looked at each other, both feeling immense relief mixed with admiration for the young mother. That would be wonderful," Eleanor said, moved. "Benjamin would have even more people to love. Him. And Valerie," Harrison added. "If you'd like, you can work with us at the foundation we're creating. Your experience could help other young mothers going through similar situations." While the adults discussed Benjamin's future, Lily watched everything with interest. To her, the idea of large, complex families was not strange. After all, she herself had gained a new family through the most unlikely circumstances. "Daddy Harrison," she said, tugging on his shirt, "now Benjamin will have 2 mommies, like I have you and Mommy Rose." "That's right, my little one," Harrison replied, picking her up. "Families can come in many different forms, but the important thing is that everyone loves each other." At that moment, Prudence arrived at the property with official documents about Lily's legal situation. "Harrison, Rose, I have good news. The court has officially authorized Lily to stay in your care while the matter of permanent custody is resolved." "And how long will that take?" Rose asked. "With all the evidence in the case, and considering that Lily is visibly well-adjusted and happy, I believe you'll have definitive custody in a few months." Everett appeared at the gate just then, accompanied by his lawyer. Since becoming a cooperating witness, he had been living under police protection but had asked to visit his great-niece. "Lily," he said hesitantly, Can I talk to you?" The girl looked at Harrison and Rose, who nodded encouragingly. "You can, Uncle Everett. I want you to know that I'm very sorry for all the bad things that happened, and that I'm trying to fix the mistakes I made." "It's okay," Lily said with her childlike wisdom. "Now everyone is being nice." "That's true, and you know what? Your Grandma Grace would be very proud of the brave girl you've become." Lily's eyes lit up at the mention of her grandmother. "You knew Grandma Grace?" "I did, and she always said you were special, that you had a very big heart." As she watched her daughter talk with Everett, Rose realized she had finally found peace. Her family had been destroyed and rebuilt in ways she could never have imagined, but now it was complete again. "Harrison," she said softly, "I think we can start seriously planning this foundation. We have a powerful story to tell, and many children to help." "Let's do it," he agreed, looking around at all the people fate had brought together on his property. "Let's build something that ensures no child goes through what Lily went through." But none of them knew that there was still one final revelation waiting, a discovery that would forever change the way they understood the mysterious connections that had brought all their lives together. 6 months had passed since the events that forever changed the lives of everyone involved. The Lily Foundation, as it had been affectionately named, was about to be officially inaugurated in a ceremony that would bring together officials, the press, and families who had been helped by the organization. The building chosen to house the foundation was in downtown Clearwater, an old colonial mansion that Harrison had bought and renovated specifically for the project. The spacious and well-lit rooms were perfect for serving children and families in vulnerable situations, offering everything from medical care to psychological and educational support. On that Saturday morning, Lily ran through the foundation's hallways wearing a light blue dress, her well-kept hair in 2 braids that Rose had lovingly made. The 4-year-old girl had transformed completely. Her smile was constant, her eyes shone with health and joy, and she radiated the confidence of a truly loved child. "Daddy Harrison!" she shouted, running towards the man who was checking the final decoration details. "Grandma Martha has arrived." Harrison smiled at the affectionate nickname Lily had given Arthur's sister. Martha had become an important figure in the girl's life, visiting her regularly and always bringing fresh fruit from her farm. "And Uncle Arthur?" Harrison asked. "He's outside helping to set up the chairs," Lily replied. "He said he wants everything to be perfect for the foundation's most important day." Arthur had undergone a remarkable transformation in recent months. After saving Lily from Prosper, he had stopped drinking and gotten a steady job at Harrison's construction company. More importantly, he had developed a genuine paternal relationship with Lily, who had completely forgiven him and now saw him as a dear uncle. "Lily," Rose said, appearing at the door with Benjamin in her arms, "Aunt Valerie has arrived and brought a surprise for you." Lily's eyes lit up. Valerie had become a constant and beloved presence in the family, working at the foundation and maintaining a wonderful relationship with Benjamin, who knew her as Aunt Val and loved her deeply. In the main hall, guests began to arrive. Prudence was coordinating the reception, having become the foundation's executive director. Everett was also present, accompanied by his wife, having completed his community service sentence and now working as a financial consultant for social organizations. "Harrison," Robert said, approaching with a folder of documents, "I have the latest news on the case. Alistair was sentenced to 17 years in prison, Prosper got 8, and we've managed to locate and help 43 families who were victims of the scheme. And the children. They're all well. Most remained with their adoptive families, who now know the truth, but have chosen to maintain their emotional bonds. A few were reunited with their biological families, always prioritizing the child's well-being. It was then that something unexpected happened. Dr. Peter Adams, the pediatrician who had examined Lily months ago, arrived at the ceremony accompanied by an elderly woman of about 70. The woman looked around the event with an expression of disbelief and emotion. "Dr. Adams," Harrison said, greeting the doctor, "I'm glad you could make it. And who is this lady?" "This is Ms. Clara Croft," the doctor replied, carefully observing Harrison's reaction. "She read about the foundation in the newspapers and asked to come and see your work." The last name immediately caught Harrison's attention. "Croft, are we related?" The elderly woman studied him with eyes that seemed familiar, though he was sure he had never seen her before. "Son," she said with a trembling voice, "my full name is Clara Miller Croft. I was married to your uncle Gabriel Croft." Harrison felt the world spin. Gabriel Croft had been his father's brother, but they had drifted away from the family decades ago due to disagreements that no one had ever clearly explained. "Did Uncle Gabriel have children?" Harrison asked, trying to process the information. "We had 3 children," Miss Clara replied, tears beginning to stream down her face. Charles, who passed away 2 years ago in a car accident, Grace, who died 6 months ago, and Richard, who lives in the city. The shock of this revelation made Harrison need to lean on a chair. Charles Miller was my cousin? He was, and Grace was little Lily's grandmother. The realization hit everyone present like a thunderbolt. Lily was not just a child who had randomly saved Harrison's life. She was his great-niece, blood family he never knew he had. That means, Rose began, processing the implications. That Lily was always family, Ms. Clara completed, searching for the girl with her eyes. Grace talked about her constantly, said she was a special child with a pure heart. When Lily approached, brought by Prudence, who had noticed the commotion, Ms. Clara knelt to be at the child's level. "Hello, my dear," she said gently. "I'm Great-Grandma Clara. I was a friend of your Grandma Grace." "Grandma used to talk about a Great-Grandma Clara," Lily exclaimed, her eyes lighting up. "She said that one day I would meet all of Mommy's family." "Your grandma was right," Miss Clara said, hugging the great-granddaughter she was meeting for the first time. "And she would be so happy to know you found your place in the family." Harrison was visibly moved. "All my life, I felt guilty for laying off Charles, for destroying a family. But now I understand that fate had other plans." "Fate," Rose said, "made it so that Lily saved the life of her own great-uncle without either of you knowing the connection. And it brought a fragmented family back together through the pure heart of a child," Ms. Clara added. The inauguration ceremony turned into an even more special celebration. When it was time for the speeches, Harrison went up to the small improvised stage in the main hall, with Lily by his side. "Friends," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "a few months ago, I thought I knew what family was, what purpose was, what love was. But a brave 4-year-old girl taught me that I knew nothing." He paused, looking at Lily, who was smiling radiantly beside him. "Lily saved me from much more than just drowning. She saved me from the empty life I was living. She showed me that true wealth lies in the connections we make, the love we share, the courage to protect those in need. And today," he continued, picking Lily up, "we discovered that our family found each other not by chance, but by a miracle that began with the generous heart of this extraordinary girl." Applause echoed through the hall as Lily waved to everyone present, surrounded by a family that had grown in ways no one could have imagined. "The Lily Foundation," Harrison concluded, "exists to ensure that every child has the chance to grow up surrounded by love, protection, and opportunities. And our first mission is accomplished. Lily is home, with her family, safe and loved." When the ceremony ended and the guests began to say their goodbyes, the family gathered in the Foundation's garden. Harrison and Eleanor, Rose, Lily and Benjamin, Valerie, Ms. Clara, Arthur and Martha, Prudence, and even Everett, all united by a story that had begun with tragedy, but ended with redemption and love. "You know what impresses me most?" Prudence said, watching Lily play with Benjamin on the lawn. "How one child managed to transform the lives of so many adults just by being brave and generous." "It wasn't just her courage," Rose replied. "It was her pure heart. Lily sees the world as it should be, a place where people take care of each other." Harrison looked around at his expanded family, people whom fate had brought together through extraordinary circumstances. "You know, Lily didn't just save my life in that river. She saved all of our lives in different ways. And now," Ms. Clara said, holding Lily's hand, "we can pay it back by saving other children through the work of the Foundation." As the sun set over Clearwater, painting the sky in golden hues, Lily ran through the garden, surrounded by all the people who loved her. Her rag doll, now sewn and clean, still accompanied her always, but it was no longer her only companion. "Daddy Harrison," she said, approaching him while the others talked. "I'm happy. I'm happy too, my little one. And you know why? Why? Because I learned that when you help people, they help you back, and then everyone is happy together." Harrison picked her up, marveling once again at the simple and profound wisdom of this extraordinary child. "You are absolutely right, and we're going to keep helping people through the foundation, aren't we?" "We are," she replied cheerfully, "and when I grow up, I'm going to help other little kids like Uncle Arthur helped me, and like you all helped me." At that moment, watching his heartfelt daughter talk about a future dedicated to helping others, Harrison knew that the Lily Foundation would be just the beginning. The girl who had saved his life would continue to save other lives, spreading kindness and hope throughout the world, proving that even in the darkest moments, there is always light when generous hearts meet and decide to care for one another. And so, a story that began with suffering and separation ended with unity, love, and the promise that a child's courage would continue to inspire acts of kindness for many years to come. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a score from 0 to 10, and thank you so much.